If Ivanka weren't my daughter, maybe I'd be dating her. Stop it. Oh, that's strange. Stop. Well, you're known for saying unexpected things. Mr. Trump. Who are you, Woody Allen? We want to learn a little more about both of you. So we play this segment here called Fave 5. I'll ask the question. Ivanka, you respond first. Then your father answers. Okay. Ivanka, what's your favorite thing you share in common with your father? Either real estate or golf. Donald, with your daughter? Well, I was going to say something, but I'd better not. When Jasmine Crockett slowly stood up during the hearing, no one imagined she was about to present information that would leave Ivanka Trump visibly unsettled. What she revealed ended up leaving a lasting impact, and the public is still reacting to it. The tension was noticeable from the moment the hearing opened. No side conversations, no movement. Just the kind of silence that fills a room where everyone senses trouble but doesn't know where it will emerge. It was a Tuesday morning in Washington, D.C. The meeting was supposed to be a standard review on ethics in government. Routine is what they say before things shift unexpectedly. C-SPAN's cameras were rolling, but few thought the session would produce anything significant. Ivanka Trump had agreed to appear voluntarily. Unusual, considering she typically avoids Capitol Hill. She arrived just before 9 a.m., wearing a simple navy suit, hair straight, her expression neutral. She was there to defend the Trump Foundation's relaunch under a new name and its stated focus on children and workforce development. Representative Jasmine Crockett had barely spoken that morning. Positioned at the far left end of the semicircle, she quietly reviewed a manila folder as if it were any typical document stack. Her face offered no hints, no reaction, no signal. Every few moments, she tapped her pen gently against her desk, slow and steady, like a quiet countdown. Chairman Halbridge, a restrained man from Oklahoma with a stiff appearance, cleared his throat and motioned toward Ivanka. You may begin. Ivanka leaned forward, adjusted the microphone, and began her statement. Her tone was even and rehearsed. Thank you, Chairman, and members of the committee. I'm here today as a private citizen. The words flowed cleanly, like they had been reviewed beforehand. She talked about impact, legacy, and responsible philanthropy. A few lawmakers nodded without interest. Most glanced at their phones. Only Jasmine appeared fully attentive. 20 minutes in, as Ivanka moved to page 2 of her printed remarks, Jasmine raised her hand. Mr. Chairman, she said. The room paused. Chairman Halbridge frowned. Ms. Crockett, we allow statements to finish. I won't take long, Jasmine replied. But for the sake of time, the committee should be aware of certain unreported connections relevant to today's discussion. Ivanka blinked. The chairman hesitated, then said, Proceed. Briefly. Jasmine stood. Not abruptly, not theatrically. Simply with the steady assurance of someone holding information she knows will shift the tone of the room without needing to raise her voice. I'd like to submit for the record a series of encrypted messages recovered from a private server linked to the Trump family's communications between 2018 and 2021. She continued, stating that these messages, along with recently declassified travel logs, raised serious concerns about whether Ivanka Trump exerted personal influence over federal policy decisions while also maintaining a relationship with the former president that fell outside accepted professional norms. The room seemed to cool. A reporter whispered from the back row. Ivanka froze momentarily, then shifted in her chair. Her jaw tightened slightly, the first sign of reaction. Jasmine held up copies of the message headers. These communications indicate frequent off-the-record meetings, some overlapping with budget discussions related to education, health policy, and foreign contracts. None of these meetings appear in official White House logs, yet Ivanka was present. So was her father. A wave moved across the room. People began texting. Someone from Ivanka's team leaned in to whisper. The chairman raised his voice. Representative Crockett, are you suggesting personal misconduct? I'm not suggesting anything, Jasmine said. I'm submitting verified communications. The committee and the public can interpret them. Ivanka finally responded, voice tight. This is false. Would you like to deny it under oath? Jasmine asked. I said it's false, and frankly offensive. Ivanka's voice trembled slightly. That was the turning point, not because of Jasmine's statement, but because Ivanka answered with emotion instead of documentation. More cameras shifted toward Jasmine. The chairman called for order, though it was clear the hearing wouldn't return to routine. But this was only the beginning of what Jasmine intended to present. She hadn't touched the second folder. She calmly returned to her seat and slid another folder forward, marked with a single dark dot. She didn't look toward Ivanka. The room was already focused. The chairman tapped his gavel. Representative Crockett, you may continue, but keep your comments relevant. They are, she said steadily. This isn't personal. It's ethical. Cameras zoomed in. Phones came up in the press area. Behind Ivanka, two aides exchanged worried whispers. Another typed rapidly and stepped out of the room. Jasmine opened the folder and held up a printed message. This communication, she said, is dated July 17, 2019, for days before the administration made a quiet adjustment to the tax allocation for charter school programs in several states. She read, "Let's have our meeting early. He doesn't want anyone else in the room. Same place. He said it's better when it's just the two of us." There were light gasps from the back. Jasmine continued. This message was sent from Ivanka Trump's encrypted account to a contact linked to the internal West Wing network. Travel logs show she flew into Milwaukee that same morning. Donald Trump was at a closed-door fundraiser. There is no public record of a meeting. No notes. No listed attendees. Ivanka straightened. That message is taken out of context. Completely distorted. You're assigning intent that isn't there. I'm quoting your wording, Jasmine replied simply. Nothing more. And I'm not accusing. I'm asking why policy shifted shortly after these meetings. Ivanka crossed her arms. These kinds of accusations are why qualified people avoid public service. It's disgraceful. It's not an accusation, Ms. Trump, Jasmine replied. It's a question, and you haven't answered it. A Republican member, Caleb Strickland of Missouri, leaned into his microphone. Mr. Chairman, are we really giving attention to conspiracy-level speculation? Jasmine turned slightly. Congressman, if you choose to call verified White House travelogue speculation, you're welcome to state that for the record. Caleb muttered but stayed silent. Jasmine continued. There's more. March 3, 2022. Days before a federal contract worth $89 million was awarded to a New York consulting firm that later acknowledged ties to the Trump family. Ivanka arrived in Sacramento the night before. Again, no official meeting record. But her father made a private stop at the same hotel. She paused. There were no security logs filed for that visit, but a hotel employee submitted an anonymous statement last year describing limited elevator access for two high-profile individuals between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. Ivanka snapped. Are you implying something inappropriate happened between me and my father? Jasmine tilted her head slightly. I'm stating that a consistent pattern of decisions, financial movements, and unrecorded meetings raises legitimate oversight concerns. This is not personal. It's accountability. The room fell heavy. Someone coughed. Jasmine reached into her folder again. One more for now. She held up a black and white photograph. This was taken by a staff member who didn't think much of it at the time. It shows Ivanka and Donald Trump leaving the rear entrance of a private estate in Naples, Florida. No public explanation for the visit was given. 2 weeks later, regional FEMA funding was quietly reduced. The estate owner is the CEO of the company that later received the federal relief subcontract. The chairman seemed as if he wanted to intervene but didn't. For the first time, Ivanka looked directly at the cameras. Her voice was lower, strained. I will not allow myself to be attacked like this. I came here in good faith. Then answer the questions, Jasmine said. The chairman raised his hand. We'll take a brief recess. But it was too late. Reporters were already standing. One shouted, Ivanka, did you influence your father's policy decisions? Another asked, Representative Crockett, do you believe Ivanka is withholding information? Jasmine didn't respond. She simply gathered her folders and rose slowly, as if she hadn't even begun. The tension wasn't outside the room. It was building inside, and Jasmine was only beginning. The hallway outside the hearing room was no longer quiet. Reporters gathered in tight clusters, firing questions no one was prepared to answer. Staff members tried to redirect them, but the momentum had already shifted. Inside, The committee room emptied gradually. Jasmine remained seated at her desk, turning through her notes with calm focus. She wasn't celebrating or smirking. She just appeared prepared. Ivanka had moved into a side chamber with her attorney and 2 aides. The door was shut, but thin walls didn't hide the raised voices. Small fragments carried through, how she wasn't supposed to have that, how clearance was even possible, and orders to get this under control. 10 minutes passed, then 15, before the chairman called the room back into session. When Ivanka returned, her posture was unchanged, but her expression was different. Her makeup remained flawless, yet her face had tightened. She looked like someone trying to stay steady despite shifting ground beneath her. She sat, adjusted her microphone, and looked directly at Jasmine. "I'd like to respond to the earlier claims," she began. The chairman nodded. Her voice was calm, but strained. "I have never used my position to influence government decisions improperly. I have served my country and my family with integrity," she continued, saying the accusations were not only offensive but beneath the dignity of the chamber. Jasmine didn't react. Ivanka continued, "Private meetings, yes, she met with her father. That was her role as a senior advisor. That's not a scandal. That's my job." "But the records," Jasmine replied gently. "You weren't on the logs." "Not every conversation appears on a public schedule," Ivanka shot back. "And that's the issue," Jasmine said. "There's no oversight when access is private but the stakes are public." Ivanka inhaled sharply. "This isn't oversight. This is an attempt to embarrass me on national television." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "If you feel embarrassed, that isn't something I control. I'm asking questions, not making personal statements." Several members shifted in their chairs. The tension wasn't limited to the 2 of them. It had spread across the entire panel. Everyone was considering what they had just witnessed, what they had heard, and whether any of it might hold. Chairman Holbridge broke the silence. "Miss Trump, can you confirm or deny the authenticity of the communications Representative Crockett submitted?" "I've never seen them before," Ivanka said. "And I won't comment on private, unverified materials." Jasmine leaned forward. "So you're not denying the meetings took place?" Ivanka hesitated. "I'm saying context matters. My father and I work together. Any assumptions beyond that are theater." The word landed heavily. Jasmine gave a faint smile. "If this is theater, the audience deserves the full presentation. I request an independent review of the server data and the travel logs submitted today, with subpoena authority." The panel reacted immediately. "That's outside today's agenda," the chairman said, "but within the Ethics Committee's jurisdiction." "It's not about one individual," Jasmine replied evenly. "It's about a pattern. Ignoring it sets a standard that private influence over public power is acceptable. Is that what this chamber wants to endorse?" No one answered. Ivanka shook her head. "You're using media attention to elevate your own profile." "Maybe," Jasmine said. "Or maybe I'm doing the job voters sent me here to do. Holding people accountable, even those accustomed to protection." The room buzzed again, but now it carried something different. Uncertainty, the kind that makes people reevaluate what they thought they knew. Ivanka leaned back, eyes fixed on Jasmine, but said nothing. Her silence carried its own message. Jasmine waited for the murmurs to settle before opening the final folder. It wasn't filled with printed emails or highlighted texts. Instead, it contained color photographs, annotated screenshots, timestamps, and maps. Visuals that needed no explanation. "I'd like to enter several exhibits into the record," she said without looking at Ivanka. These included GPS data from federal flight logs, hotel staffing schedules, and images from surveillance systems in government-leased facilities. One photo captured everyone's attention. It showed Ivanka leaving a side entrance of the Intercontinental Hotel in Austin, Texas, at 11:34 p.m., flanked by security that did not match her official detail. Behind her stood a man in a black coat looking at his phone. The metadata aligned with a visit Donald Trump made to the same hotel during a private lobbying dinner 2 nights before a major infrastructure bill was altered. One that benefited contractors connected to the Trump organization. Jasmine didn't narrate every detail. She allowed the images to speak. "This isn't about proving someone lied," she said. "It's about showing that those with the most influence are often the least scrutinized. That lack of scrutiny shouldn't exist. Not for elected officials and not for their relatives. Ivanka shifted, biting her lip, the cameras catching every movement. Another image appeared, Ivanka seated next to her father on a private jet in October 2020. No press, no public itinerary. Jasmine pointed to the timestamp and the altered flight path. The plane had diverted midair to Charleston, West Virginia. That same week, a federal prison contract was reassigned to a private vendor whose CEO had recently donated to the Trump Victory PAC. This is a smear campaign, Ivanka said sharply. You're connecting unrelated events. Then help disconnect them, Jasmine replied. An aide behind Ivanka whispered something and passed a note. She read it quickly and slid it under her notepad. I'm not entertaining this circus, she said. None of this is criminal. You're taking private moments and implying wrongdoing. This isn't about private moments, Jasmine responded. It's about patterns. Timelines. When something consistently aligns with coordination, it raises questions. Representative Dilea Monroe, a moderate who had remained silent until now, leaned in. Representative Crockett, are you stating that Ivanka Trump acted as an unofficial policy advisor outside her official role and without oversight? I'm not stating it, Jasmine said. I'm presenting materials that indicate exactly that. Monroe turned to the chairman. Then I support a formal review. The room reacted. Until now, Jasmine had carried this alone. Now someone from the political center had stepped beside her. Ivanka looked stunned. I don't know what you think you're seeing, but my role was always ethical and within proper structure. Then demonstrate that, Monroe said. Right now, it doesn't appear that way. A long pause followed. Ivanka started to speak, then stopped. She glanced at her attorney, who whispered again and tapped the table. A subtle signal. Chairman Holbridge cleared his throat. The committee will recess again while we determine next steps. But no one moved. Reporters stayed seated. Public live streams were at record highs. Jasmine's name was trending nationwide, and images from the exhibits were already spreading online. Before the cameras cut away, Jasmine leaned forward. There's more, she said quietly, but loud enough for the mic and Ivanka to hear. I'll let you decide how much should become part of the official record. But once something ignites, you don't control how far it burns. When the committee reconvened, the atmosphere was noticeably different. The chairs creaked less, the side conversations faded. No one checked their phones. The focus was inside the room now. Chairman Holbridge looked uneasy, not guilty, just aware that the usual protections no longer applied. Before we continue, he said, this remains a formal proceeding. We expect relevance to the agenda. Jasmine sat calmly, hands folded. Ivanka appeared composed again but avoided eye contact entirely. Representative Monroe raised her microphone. Mr. Chairman, I move to pause the rest of today's agenda to address the evidence provided by Representative Crockett. It was a bold move. Monroe was known for strategy, not confrontation. But something had shifted. That's highly irregular, the chairman said. So are encrypted communications from a non-elected individual directing federal decisions, Monroe replied. A quiet wave of agreement passed through the panel. Members who had previously stayed neutral began leaning forward, not necessarily toward Jasmine, but away from indecision. Ivanka leaned in. I'd like to make a statement. Jasmine didn't interrupt. I didn't expect this environment, Ivanka said. I came here in good faith to discuss charitable work. Instead, I'm facing a politically motivated attack. Then let's return to facts, Jasmine said. If this is political, specify which dates are incorrect, which messages were fabricated, which trips didn't occur. Ivanka stiffened. You know I can't speak on classified travel. These were not classified, Jasmine said. They were simply omitted. That's not the same. The chairman spoke quietly. If there is to be an independent review, it must follow procedure. Jasmine nodded. Of course. I'll prepare a formal motion. But then an unexpected voice entered. Representative Leo Franco, a conservative from Arizona, spoke. Before this gets buried in procedure, I want to comment. He didn't look at either woman. His eyes were on the audience. Whichever side you're on, whether you see this as excessive or overdue, We must admit we've allowed too much to go unchecked over the years. The comments surprised everyone, especially Ivanka. I'm not saying I accept everything shown here, Franco continued. But I do believe we owe the public transparency, even when the questions are uncomfortable. Ivanka's face stayed still, but her foot tapped beneath the table. Thank you, Representative Franco, Jasmine said. The chairman looked drained. The motion to suspend the agenda is under review. We'll break for 5 minutes. He struck the gavel and exited quickly. As the room loosened, Jasmine stood and walked toward the back exit. Steady, not smiling. Ivanka watched her leave, her hand tightening into a fist under the desk. An aide leaned in to speak, but Ivanka didn't respond. Outside, reporters crowded the hallway, calling out questions. Jasmine ignored them, heading straight for the stairwell, avoiding cameras. She wasn't seeking attention, but attention was finding her. Once people notice, silence starts to look like acceptance. By mid-afternoon, Jasmine's questioning dominated every platform. Clips spread across Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and Reddit. Some were short, just long enough to show Jasmine holding up the photo of Ivanka outside the Intercontinental. Others were full 10-minute segments with commentary from legal experts, creators, and former officials. The hashtag Crockett vs. Ivanka had surpassed 5 million views in under 12 hours. Then another piece surfaced. Footage from October 2020. A grainy late-night clip from a local Charleston station showed Trump's motorcade arriving at a back entrance. The angle was poor, the lighting dim, but the timestamp matched the flight data Jasmine referenced earlier. In the second SUV, a blonde figure stepped out alone. No press, no crowd, only security. Online viewers immediately dissected it. Is that Ivanka? Why was she there? She had no reason to be involved in that meeting. Explain how any of this is normal. Every frame was examined. And the more people looked, the more the details aligned. Jasmine's folder had included hotel reports, GPS data, and elevator logs. Now paired with this rediscovered local clip, the picture grew sharper. Ivanka's defenders attempted to push back. Her communications director released a short statement around 4 p.m. Today's hearing was filled with political theater and misleading claims. Ms. Trump has always acted with integrity. But the message fell flat. There was no denial, no clarification. Just wording that felt vague, far too vague for the moment. Meanwhile, Jasmine still hadn't spoken to the press. She didn't need to. Her team quietly shared a 12-page PDF with the committee press corps marked for immediate transparency. It included redacted flight logs and screenshots of the metadata she used in her presentation. Everything had timestamps. Everything had a source. Journalists who dismissed the hearing that morning were suddenly digging through old visitor logs. Talk shows invited ethics experts and body language analysts. One noted that Ivanka's reaction didn't look like frustration over false claims. It looked like someone losing control of the narrative. Back inside the Capitol, Ivanka waited in a private lounge for her car. Her aides had gone silent, their phones buzzing with unread messages. She stared at the carpet, barely blinking. They weren't supposed to have that, she whispered. Her lawyer looked up. Which folder? The one with the photo from Austin. That isn't public. That came from someone inside. You think it's one of the former staff? Ivanka didn't answer. She kept staring. Because no one wanted to say it out loud, Jasmine hadn't guessed at these meetings. She'd known every time, every location, every coded message. She hadn't stumbled onto anything. Someone close to Ivanka had been giving Jasmine breadcrumbs. Someone who no longer wanted to stay silent. Outside, the car pulled in. Ivanka stood slowly, jaw tight. I'm not responding to anything until we find out who leaked this. Her lawyer sighed. The leaks aren't the worst part. The optics are. She didn't reply. At the same time, Jasmine's office stayed quiet. No victory speech. No media tour. Just an assistant walking down the hall carrying a fresh stack of printed emails and a new folder under his arm. Because while Ivanka focused on damage control, Jasmine was preparing for what came next. The hallway outside Ivanka's private room was still, but inside the atmosphere was tense. Her senior advisor, Vincent Dry, paced in tight circles, sweat forming under his collar. Another aide, Carla, stood in a corner typing rapidly on her phone. The silence wasn't calm. It was the kind that follows being caught in a lie, when no one knows which part of the story has already fallen apart. Ivanka sat on the edge of a beige leather couch, still in heels, still in makeup, but visibly exhausted. She tapped her fingers against a water bottle she wasn't drinking from. She hadn't spoken in 5 minutes. Then suddenly, who gave it to her? Vincent stopped pacing. We don't know. But someone had access to files we never cleared. Not just files, Ivanka muttered. The photos, the timestamps, the messages, that didn't come from a records request. That came from inside. Possibly, he said. Or someone flipped. She shook her head. No. We have a traitor back on Capitol Hill. The conversation moved on quickly. Jasmine Crockett wasn't in front of cameras. She was in a small committee room with 3 aides and a man from the Oversight Subcommittee who had flown in from Pennsylvania that afternoon. His name was Ross Banford, quiet, methodical, known for avoiding attention and digging into details others ignored. This is bigger than one ethics hearing, Ross said, flipping through the material Jasmine gave him. I've been waiting for someone to open this door. I didn't think it would be you. And definitely not this fast. He held up a flight record. You confirmed this with Homeland Security twice? Yes, Jasmine said. The second confirmation came from an anonymous DHS contractor. Everything aligned. He nodded. And the encrypted emails, these are cleaned versions of private messages from a hard drive seized in late 2022 during a separate financial fraud investigation. That drive came from a former advisor to the Trump Foundation. Most people thought it was useless. Ross exhaled. It wasn't useless. No, Jasmine said. It's leverage. Ross didn't smile. Leverage like this makes people nervous. Not just Ivanka, not just her family. Everyone who benefited from ignoring the details. Jasmine leaned back. I'm not trying to knock down the whole tree. I'm exposing the rot. He met her eyes. Just be prepared. People don't stay quiet when their money is at risk, especially people who rarely hear the word, no. Meanwhile, Vincent and Carla were on the phone with a crisis management strategist, an old ally of the Trump circle who specialized in one tactic, delay and distract. We're prepping a media push to discredit the hearing, he said over speaker. We'll bring in statements from former administration allies. Make this look like a political stunt. Ivanka stared out the window. No one will believe that if we don't explain the documents. That's not the strategy, he replied. The strategy is to create doubt about the source. Truth isn't the goal. Doubt is. Ivanka turned. And if the person leaking this continues? A pause. Then you consider a proactive legal move. Force Jasmine to identify her sources. If she refuses, say the documents are fabricated. If she complies, you scare any future whistleblower into silence. Silence followed. Back in Jasmine's office, her assistant knocked. Congressional counsel is requesting an interview. Legal, not media. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. They want to know how deep this goes? Yes. I'll talk, she said. But not behind closed doors. When you make something public, you protect it. She had no intention of burying anything. The committee room was half empty when Representative Vincent Renner walked in. A second-term Republican from rural Idaho, he usually kept a low profile. No flashy interviews, no social media drama. But he read every document thoroughly. That afternoon, as the hearing reconvened, he surprised everyone. Chairman Halbridge attempted to skip the topic entirely, trying to return to the original agenda on charitable transparency. But just as he began, Renner clicked his mic. Before we proceed, he said calmly, I'd like to revisit Representative Crockett's motion for a formal review of the submitted materials. Halbridge hesitated. That motion is still under consideration. And I support it, Renner said, cutting in. Ignoring what we saw today would be a mistake. Ivanka, seated 2 chairs away, slowly turned toward him. She didn't look angry, she looked betrayed. Are you serious? She asked softly, loud enough to be heard. This isn't personal, Ms. Trump, Renner replied. This is process. You're legitimizing a smear campaign. I'm saying facts deserve sunlight. If nothing is hidden, then nothing should be feared. Jasmine leaned slightly toward her microphone. Thank you, Representative Renner. I'm not supporting your conclusions, he clarified, still not looking at her. I'm supporting your right to ask the question. Chairman Halbridge adjusted his tie. This committee is not a court. These are not criminal proceedings. Understood, Renner said. But we are lawmakers. If we avoid reviewing conduct that borders on influence abuse, what exactly is our purpose here? A heavy silence followed. The kind that comes when someone finally says something everyone has been avoiding. Halbridge muttered that they'd vote later in the week, but it was clear momentum had shifted. News outlets quickly highlighted Renner's comments. Headlines read, Republican supports inquiry into Ivanka evidence. Not because he endorsed Jasmine's claims, but because he agreed they warranted review. That alone cracked the wall inside the chamber. Ivanka sat rigid, staring at Renner. Her knuckles whitened around her pen. She whispered to Carla, "We need to find out who got to him." Jasmine scribbled one word on her notepad. Leverage. She wasn't rushing. The facts weren't disappearing. And for the first time, the room wasn't seeing her as a disruptor. They were seeing her as someone with documentation and the confidence to stand by it. A few seats over, Delia Monroe glanced at Jasmine, then at Renner, giving a brief nod. Not alliance. Just acknowledgement. Outside the hearing, more developments unfolded. A non-profit watchdog group filed a Freedom of Information Act request for every security log and visitor record tied to the dates Jasmine mentioned. Reporters compared Jasmine's claims with archived footage, tax documents, property records. The pieces were starting to align on their own. Inside the Capitol, the biggest shift wasn't in evidence. It was in posture. Members who avoided Jasmine earlier now looked directly at her when she spoke. Staffers who rolled their eyes that morning were now asking for copies of material she hadn't even shown yet. The silence around her was breaking. When truth echoes in a room, people pretending not to hear it eventually have to listen. By dawn the next day, the story dominated headlines. It wasn't buried under economic news or weather updates. It was front page. Anchors used terms like explosive, shocking, and possibly historic. Even networks that typically stayed away from political controversy couldn't ignore it. This wasn't about one committee hearing anymore. It was about what it exposed, and who was willing to say it aloud. Ivanka's team scrambled to contain the fallout. They released a pre-taped interview with a friendly morning show host, trying to shift focus back to her foundation work. But viewers weren't convinced. The network's comment section filled with questions. What about the hotel meetings? Why avoid the logs? 10 screenshots from the hearing circulated widely, each more concerning than the last. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett hadn't spoken publicly once. No posts, no interviews. She let the evidence speak, and that silence made her message louder. It made her look like someone with nothing to hide. At her district office in Fort Worth, her team gathered early. Many hadn't slept. Phones rang non-stop. Email inboxes overflowed, with messages from voters, whistleblowers, legal analysts, and unexpectedly, 3 former White House aides who wanted to share information privately. Jasmine walked in holding a coffee, eyes sharp. She hadn't taken a sip. Let it ride, she told her staff. We don't chase cameras. We chase truth. The sentence was simple, but it carried weight. Back in D.C., several Republican members who kept quiet the day before began hosting private meetings, not to suddenly pursue accountability, but because their donors were watching, and donors dislike uncertainty. Renner was asked to clarify his remarks in private. He didn't retreat. She asked the right questions, he told them. If that bothers people, maybe they're part of the issue. By midday, the Oversight Subcommittee issued a public statement. A preliminary review of the evidence presented by Representative Crockett is underway. Further information to follow. That one sentence signaled the shift. Jasmine's actions were no longer just headlines. They were now formal procedure. Ivanka canceled 2 public events. A scheduled press dinner in Baltimore was dropped. Rumors swirled about an emergency family meeting behind closed doors. No one could confirm her location.